Put that pot down right now. I've been telling you for 6 years, you must never cook. Eric!
What are you talking about? I only wanted to make dinner for you.
Rushing into the modern kitchen of their luxurious home in Kigali's Nyarutarama neighborhood, while Nadia Uwimana and her best friend, Claudine Mukamana, stood frozen in shock. A single pot of simmering soup had sent the gentle, loving husband into a panic, as though his wife's life were in immediate danger. Everyone believed he was nothing more than a controlling husband who refused to let his wife cook. But just a few hours later, when a sealed medical file was finally opened, the truth left everyone in the room speechless. Before we begin, tell us where you're watching from. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and join us for more meaningful stories. At 8:05 a.m., soft morning sunlight poured over the luxurious villa in Nyarutarama, one of the most modern residential neighborhoods in Kigali. Large glass windows reflected the clear blue sky, while the front garden bloomed with carefully trimmed bougainvillea and hibiscus flowers. Inside the house, everything carried the refined elegance of a successful family. The cream-colored sofa, the piano beside the window, the contemporary Rwandan artwork on the walls, and the spacious open kitchen with smart appliances made anyone who entered feel as if they had stepped into a magazine spread. Nadia Uwimana stood near the kitchen entrance, dressed in an emerald green office dress that made her look graceful and composed. Her hair was neatly styled, her earrings were simple, and her face carried the quiet beauty of a woman who had learned how to smile even when something inside her felt unfinished. She looked at the white marble island in the middle of the kitchen, then at the shining pots hanging neatly above the counter. Everything was perfect, except for one thing. That kitchen had never truly belonged to her. 6 years of marriage, and Nadia had never cooked a single meal for her husband. Not breakfast, not dinner, not even a cup of tea when Eric came home tired from work. At first, she thought it was love. Eric Habineza, her husband, was a respected architect and the director of a growing design company in Kigali. He was gentle, responsible, and thoughtful in ways many women would envy. He remembered anniversaries, bought her books without being asked, called when he would be late, and never allowed her to carry heavy bags when he was beside her. But from the first week of their marriage, he had made one strange rule. Nadia was not allowed to cook. He did not shout when he said it. He did not sound cruel. He simply stood beside her in that beautiful kitchen, touched her hand gently and said, "My love, from now on, Chantal will handle everything in the kitchen. I want you to rest." Nadia had laughed then. "Eric, I know how to cook." "I know," he replied softly. "Then why hire a chef? Because you deserve to be taken care of." It sounded romantic. For a while, she believed it was. Then 1 month became 1 year. 1 year became 3, and now 6 years had passed. Chantal Uwera, the private chef, arrived every morning with fresh ingredients and a polite smile. She prepared soups, grilled fish, vegetables, rice, stews, and everything Eric liked. She was respectful to Nadia and never crossed any boundary. Yet every sound from the kitchen reminded Nadia of something she had lost without understanding why. Nadia had loved cooking long before she became an interior designer. In university, her small rented apartment was always filled with the smell of roasted spices, fresh bread, or warm soup. Her friends used to say Nadia's food could make a hard day feel lighter. Even when she and Eric were dating, some of their happiest memories were not in expensive restaurants, but in her tiny kitchen where they laughed over burnt pancakes and over-salted stew. Back then, Eric had eaten everything she made. He had smiled. He had praised her. He had once told her, if home had a flavor, it would taste like your cooking. That was why the silence after their wedding hurt so deeply. The doorbell rang. Nadia turned away from the kitchen and walked toward the living room. A moment later, Claudine Mukamana entered, wearing a burgundy dress and carrying a leather folder under one arm. Claudine was a lawyer, sharp-minded, confident, and the kind of friend who could see sadness even when it was hidden behind expensive curtains. "Nadia," Claudine said warmly, opening her arms. The two women hugged. "You look beautiful," Nadia said. "And you look like you were thinking too much again," Claudine replied. Nadia smiled. "You always say that because it is always true." They sat in the living room as Chantal brought tea and small biscuits on a silver tray. When the chef returned to the kitchen, Claudine watched her for a moment, then looked back at Nadia. She's still here? Nadia nodded. Yes. 6 years? Yes. Claudine picked up her teacup, then paused. And you still have not cooked for Eric? Nadia's fingers tightened around her cup. No, the answer was quiet. Too quiet. Claudine leaned back slowly. Nadia, that is not normal. Nadia looked toward the garden. He says he wants me to rest, but you do not see cooking as work. No, you love it. Nadia swallowed. I used to. You still do. The room became still. From the kitchen came the faint sound of a knife touching a cutting board. Steady, controlled, familiar. It was the kind of sound that should have belonged to Nadia, but somehow never did. Claudine lowered her voice. Have you asked Eric why? Many times. And he hugs me. He says I should not worry. Then the next day he asked Chantal to plan a new menu. Claudine frowned. That is not an answer. I know, does he dislike your cooking? Nadia looked down. He used to love it, then something changed. Nadia did not reply, because deep in her heart, she had been asking herself the same question for 6 years. What changed? Was it her? Was it something she did? Was there a reason Eric could not say? Or was this simply the part of her he no longer wanted? Claudine reached across the table and took her hand. Nadia, listen to me. Nadia looked up. If a man loves you, he should not quietly take away the thing that makes you feel alive. He has done many good things for me. I am not denying that. Then what are you saying? Claudine held her gaze. I am saying love should not make you feel like a guest in your own home. The word struck deeper than Nadia expected. A guest. That was exactly how she sometimes felt when she stood near the kitchen doorway. Not a wife, not the woman of the house. Just someone watching another woman prepare the meals that should have carried her love. Nadia blinked back the heaviness in her eyes. I do not want to be ungrateful. Claudine's expression softened. Wanting to be understood is not ingratitude. Nadia turned again toward the kitchen. Chantal was arranging vegetables on the counter. The sunlight touched the polished surfaces, making the entire space glow. It was beautiful, modern, safe, and silent in all the wrong ways. Then Claudine asked the question Nadia had been avoiding for years. If Eric loves you so much, why does he refuse to let you do the one thing you love most? Nadia had no answer, but somewhere inside her, a small door opened. And for the first time in 6 years, she wondered whether the truth was not that Eric disliked her cooking. Maybe the truth was much bigger and much more painful. Eric Habineza closed the door of his office on the 12th floor of Horizon Axis, his architecture company in central Kigali. Behind him, the wide glass windows looked out over the city as buildings slowly began to glow with evening lights. On his desk lay the design plans for a new commercial complex, but for more than 10 minutes he had not looked at them once. His eyes were fixed only on his phone screen, where a familiar reminder had appeared. Nadia's routine health checkup. Eric closed his eyes for a moment. For 6 years he had never missed that reminder. Not once. There was a knock at the door. His assistant stepped inside. Mr. Eric, the investor meeting is finished. Do you need anything else before your business trip tomorrow? Eric gave a small smile. No, you can go home. Yes, sir. The door closed again. The entire office floor became quiet except for the soft hum of the air conditioner. Eric opened his contacts, stopped at a familiar name and pressed call. The man on the other end answered quickly. Hello, Eric. The voice was calm and steady. It's me, Dr. Samuel. Eric walked toward the glass window. I'm sorry to disturb you again, doctor. I assume you did not call just to ask about my day. Eric let out a faint breath. Do you have Nadia's latest test results? There was a short silence. All her numbers looked stable. Eric exhaled as if a heavy stone had finally been lifted from his chest. Thank you, doctor. Samuel continued. You still have not told her, have you? Eric looked down at the moving cars far below. No, how long do you plan to keep this from her? Eric did not answer immediately. Then he said quietly, as long as I can. The doctor's voice became firmer. Eric, I understand that you want to protect your wife. But some secrets become more dangerous the longer they stay hidden. I know, then why continue? Eric gave a sad little laugh. If it were you, doctor, would you want the woman you love to wake up every day afraid of her own body? Dr. Samuel was silent for a moment. I only fear that when Nadia finally learns the truth, what will hurt her most may not be what happened years ago. It may be realizing that the person closest to her did not trust her enough to face it with her. Eric lowered his head. I will tell her. When? P. When I am certain there is no risk left. The call ended. Eric remained by the window for a long time. Inside his desk drawer, there was an old brown envelope. P. He opened it carefully. Inside was not a contract or a business document. It was a family photograph. A woman in a bright blue kitenge dress smiled warmly beside the industrial kitchen of a hotel restaurant. P. Standing next to her was a young Eric, holding his mother's arm with pride. Eric touched the edge of the photograph. His father's old words echoed in his mind. P. Your mother always said the kitchen was where happiness was made, but that same place had taken her away from him. P. Years ago, Eric's mother had worked as a kitchen manager for a large hotel chain. She spent long hours around smoke, heat, cleaning chemicals, and heavy kitchen equipment. P. At first, she dismissed her symptoms as tiredness. By the time the doctors discovered how badly her lungs had been damaged, it was too late. P. When she died, Eric was old enough to understand loss, but not old enough to survive it without changing. Since then, every time he saw the woman he loved near a stove, something inside him tightened with fear. P. Not because he hated cooking, because he was terrified of losing another woman he loved. Another knock came at the door. His father, Emmanuel Rugema, stepped inside. P. He had passed near the company after a meeting and decided to check on his son. You are still here? Eric quickly placed the photograph back into the envelope. P. I was about to leave. Emmanuel sat in the chair across from him. How is Nadia? She is well. The older man studied his son's face. Are you still blaming yourself? P. Eric looked away. I am not blaming myself. No, Emmanuel said softly. You are afraid. Eric said nothing. P. After your mother died, I could not enter the kitchen for years, Emmanuel continued. I thought avoiding it would protect me from remembering. Eric listened quietly. P. But fear does not protect the people we love, his father said. It only keeps us trapped in the past. Eric looked at him. P. If Nadia finds out everything one day, she will be angry. Maybe. She may never forgive me. Emmanuel shook his head. What hurts a woman most is not always the truth. P. Sometimes it is realizing she was left outside the truth for too long. Those words landed heavily in Eric's chest. He remembered the way Nadia looked at the kitchen whenever Chantal prepared dinner. P. It was not jealousy, it was not pride, it was grief. She did not simply miss the kitchen. She missed the feeling of loving someone with her own hands. His phone vibrated. P. It was a message from Nadia. Come home early if you can. I bought the tea you like. Eric stared at the message for a long moment. A gentle smile touched his lips. P. He typed back, I will come home. Then he opened the smart home app on his phone. His finger paused over the section labeled kitchen safety. P. He activated the remote safety lock for the cooking system until he returned home. A confirmation appeared on the screen. Kitchen secured successfully. Eric whispered, almost too quietly for himself to hear. P. Just a little longer, Nadia. I promise I will tell you everything. But he did not know that the moment his car left the parking garage, something unexpected was already beginning inside their home. P. At 5:36 p.m., Nadia Uwiman had just finished watering the flowers in the front garden when her phone rang. P. She wiped her hands on a small towel and smiled as she saw Chantal Uwera's name appear on the screen. Mrs. Nadia, I'm so sorry for calling at the last minute. P. Chantal's voice was filled with worry. What happened, Chantal? My mother has just been admitted to the hospital. The doctors want to keep her under observation immediately. P. I won't be able to come and prepare dinner tonight. Nadia's expression softened. Is she all right? We're still waiting for the test results. Don't worry about work. P. Stay with your mother. But I promised Mr. Eric. Family comes first. Thank you. And I'm really sorry. You don't have to apologize. P. After the call ended, Nadia remained standing quietly in the garden. For the first time in years, the kitchen inside the house would be empty. No chef. P. No prepared dinner. Just silence. She did not understand why, but her heart suddenly began beating faster. The doorbell rang. Claudine walked in carrying a paper bag. I brought those coffee pastries you like. P. Nadia smiled. You always know when to visit. The two women settled into the living room, and Nadia told her about Chantal's emergency. So? P. Claudine said, what's the plan for dinner? I'll probably order takeout. Really? What other choice do I have? Claudine looked directly at her. You. Nadia blinked. P. Me? Yes. Cook. The single word hung in the air. Nadia instinctively glanced toward the kitchen. It was only a few steps away, yet somehow, it felt farther than ever. I can't. Why not? Eric won't like it. Claudine folded her arms. How long are you going to let someone else decide what you can do in your own home? He isn't forcing me, isn't he? Nadia hesitated. He's protecting me. Protecting you from what? I don't know, and that doesn't bother you? Nadia looked down. It does. Then why have you accepted it for 6 years? She remained silent because she had asked herself that same question countless times. Every time she reached for the kitchen door. Every time she wanted to make breakfast. Every anniversary. Every birthday. Every evening when Eric returned home tired from work, she had wanted to cook. Not because she had to, because it was her favorite way to say, I love you. Claudine stood up. Nadia. She gently held her friend's hand. If today were the last day you allowed fear to make decisions for you, what would you do? Nadia looked into her eyes. I'm not afraid. Are you sure? She stopped. Because she was afraid. Not afraid of Eric shouting. He had never shouted at her. Not afraid of him becoming angry. He rarely did. She was afraid of discovering the reason behind 6 years of silence. Because once she knew, nothing would ever feel the same again. Claudine smiled gently. Come with me. Where? To your kitchen. It isn't my kitchen. Claudine raised an eyebrow. Really? Whose name is on the property papers? Ours. Who designed the interior? I did. Who chose every cabinet, every light fixture, every piece of marble? I did. Then whose kitchen is it? Nadia looked toward the bright, elegant space. For the first time in years, she whispered. Mine. Exactly. Claudine took her by the hand. Let's cook, not to prove anything, not to challenge Eric, but because this house should also feel like yours. A long silence followed. Then Nadia smiled. Just one meal, Claudine grinned. That's all I wanted to hear. Together they walked into the kitchen. Nadia stood in front of the white marble island. She slowly placed her fingertips on the smooth surface. A flood of memories came rushing back. Her university apartment. Late nights experimenting with recipes. The first dinner she ever cooked for Eric. The pancakes they accidentally burned. The soup he insisted was perfect even though it needed more salt. She closed her eyes for a brief moment. Those memories had never disappeared. They had only been waiting. She opened the cabinets. Everything was perfectly organized. Pots, pans, knives, spices, fresh vegetables. Nothing was missing. Claudine laughed. Your husband really is an architect. What makes you say that? Everything has its exact place. Nadia smiled. He likes things organized. And today you're about to bring life back into this room. Nadia opened a small cabinet near the refrigerator. There, hanging neatly on a hook, was a green apron. She froze. It was the apron Eric had bought for her just before their wedding. She had completely forgotten about it. It still looked brand new, untouched for 6 years. Her fingers gently brushed across the fabric. He kept it. Claudine smiled. Maybe not everything is what you think. Nadia slowly tied the apron around her waist. It fit perfectly, almost as though it had been waiting all these years for this exact moment. She took fresh vegetables from the refrigerator, carrots, potatoes, onions, beef. Her hands moved naturally. The knife glided smoothly across the cutting board. The rhythm returned almost instantly. Slice, chop, stir. The sounds filled the one silent kitchen. Claudine leaned against the counter watching. You know something? What? I haven't seen you smile like this in years. Nadia paused. She hadn't realized it. Since stepping into the kitchen, she had been smiling without thinking. Not because cooking was difficult, but because it felt like reclaiming a piece of herself. She placed the beef into the pot. The onions began to sizzle. A warm aroma slowly spread throughout the room. Claudine closed her eyes. That smells incredible. Nadia laughed softly. I hope Eric likes it. He'll love it. I haven't cooked in years. Trust me, he'll never forget tonight. Just then, Nadia's phone vibrated. She glanced at the screen. A message from Eric. I'm leaving earlier than expected. I'll be home soon. Her heartbeat quickened. He's coming home. Claudine smiled excitedly. Perfect. This will be the biggest surprise of your marriage. Nadia looked back at the simmering soup. Steam rose gently from the pot. She imagined Eric taking the first spoonful. Maybe, just maybe. Tonight would finally answer the question she had carried in her heart for 6 long years. She had no idea. that only minutes later, the familiar aroma filling the kitchen would send Eric into complete panic and make everyone believe he was the most controlling husband they had ever seen. The rich aroma of slow-cooked beef soup drifted through the first floor of the Habineza residence. Warm, golden lights reflected off the polished marble countertops, making the modern kitchen feel more welcoming than ever before. Nadia Uwimana stood beside the stove, gently stirring the soup with a wooden spoon, while steam rose softly into the air. A peaceful smile rested on her face, the kind Claudine had not seen in years. Leaning against the kitchen island, Claudine watched her friend with satisfaction. "I knew it." Nadia turned around. "Knew what? You belong in this kitchen." Nadia laughed. "You're exaggerating." "Not at all." Claudine walked closer. "You look different today." "How?" "You look alive again." Nadia glanced down at the green apron tied around her waist. "I've missed this." She scooped a small spoonful of soup into a bowl. After tasting it, she nodded with quiet satisfaction. "It still tastes the same." Claudine smiled. "I told you, Eric is going to be amazed. I hope he likes it." At that very moment, the sound of a car pulling into the driveway echoed through the quiet evening. Both women instinctively looked toward the front windows. Nadia smiled nervously. "He's home." Her heart began to race. After 6 years, this would be the very first meal she had ever prepared for her husband as his wife. She quickly adjusted her hair before carrying plates to the dining table. The front door opened. Eric Habineza stepped inside, carrying his briefcase after a long day at work. He was about to call Nadia's name. Then he stopped. Something felt different. The air inside the house. A familiar smell. His breathing suddenly slowed. His eyes widened. "No," the word escaped his lips almost as a whisper. His briefcase slipped from his hand and hit the floor. Without another thought, Eric ran toward the kitchen. "Nadia!" She looked up, surprised. "Eric!" He didn't answer. Instead, he rushed straight past her. The first thing he did was switch off the induction stove. Then he immediately turned the ventilation system to its highest setting. Next, he opened every glass door leading to the garden. A rush of cool evening air swept into the room. The curtains fluttered wildly. Claudine stared in disbelief. "What are you doing?" Eric ignored the question. He turned toward Nadia. His face had gone pale. "Are you all right?" She blinked. "What, are you okay?" "Yes." "How long have you been standing here?" "For a little over an hour." Eric immediately grabbed both of her shoulders. "Do you feel short of breath?" "No." "Any dizziness?" "No." "A headache?" "No." Nadia stared at him, completely confused. "Eric, you're frightening me." Without another word, he gently but firmly guided her away from the stove. "Come with me." She stopped walking. He looked at her. "Please, no." For the first time in 6 years. Nadia refused. She looked directly into his eyes. "I only made dinner, so why are you acting like this?" Eric opened his mouth, then closed it again. He wanted to tell her, he truly did, but the words refused to come. Claudine stepped forward. "Mr. Sabineza." Eric turned toward her. "Do you even realize what you've just done?" "Yes." "No." She shook her head. "You don't. You just made Nadia believe that everything she did was wrong." Eric immediately answered. "No." "Then explain it." He couldn't. "Not yet," Claudine continued. "For 6 years she stayed out of this kitchen. She respected your wishes. She never complained. Today the chef had an emergency. She simply wanted to cook one meal for the man she loves. And you rushed in as though she had committed some terrible crime." The room fell silent. Nadia slowly looked toward the pot of soup, still releasing gentle clouds of steam. Then she asked the question she had carried inside her heart for years. "Do you hate my cooking that much?" Eric's face changed instantly. "No, then why?" He searched for the right words. Nothing came. "Eric," her voice trembled. "For 6 years, I believed you simply wanted me to rest, but today..." She swallowed hard. "Today I realized maybe you've never wanted to eat anything I cook." Eric took one step toward her. "Nadia." She stepped back. "Don't. I just want the truth. What did I do wrong?" Her question struck him harder than anything else could have. He had imagined this moment countless times, but he had never imagined seeing tears in her eyes. He reached toward her again. She quietly wiped it away, a tear before it could fall. "I've spent 6 years trying to understand. I blamed myself. I wondered if I wasn't good enough. I even wondered if you were embarrassed by me." Eric's heart sank. "Nadia, none of that is true. Then tell me what is. Silence. The silence hurt more than any answer ever could. Just then, Eric's phone began vibrating. He glanced at the screen. Dr. Samuel. His hands trembled as he answered. Doctor, the doctor's voice sounded urgent. I've reviewed Nadia's latest medical file. Yes? Where are you? At home. Good. I'll be there shortly. Eric frowned. Is something wrong? No, the doctor paused briefly. But I believe the time has come. The time for what? For Nadia to finally know the truth. The call ended. Eric slowly lowered the phone. He looked at his wife, for the first time in 6 years. The fear in his eyes was no longer stronger than his guilt. He took a slow breath. Please, just give me a little more time. Nadia looked at him with quiet disappointment. I've already given you 6 years. She turned away. Without another word, she walked upstairs. Eric stood motionless in the middle of the living room. The soup remained untouched on the dining table. The aroma that had once represented love now filled the house with misunderstanding. Closing his eyes, Eric finally admitted to himself what he had refused to accept for years. If Dr. Samuel did not arrive soon, he would not lose Nadia because of illness. He would lose her because she no longer had any reason to believe him. At 9:14 a.m., the doorbell echoed through the quiet villa. Since the previous evening, no one in the house had truly slept. Nadia sat silently beside the living room window, holding a cup of tea that had long gone cold. Eric stood alone on the terrace, his eyes red from an entire night without sleep. Claudine had stayed overnight, unwilling to leave her friend alone after everything that had happened. The housekeeper opened the front door. An older gentleman in a grey coat stepped inside, carrying a worn black leather briefcase. It was Dr. Samuel Nyonzima. He greeted everyone politely before his eyes settled on Nadia. Good morning, Nadia. Good morning, doctor. No one spoke again. The atmosphere was so heavy that even the sound of the grandfather clock seemed unusually loud. Dr. Samuel walked to the coffee table and carefully placed his briefcase on it. He did not open it immediately. Instead, he looked toward Eric. Would you like to tell her yourself? Eric lowered his head. His voice was rough. I can't. The doctor nodded with understanding. I thought you might say that. He slowly unlocked the briefcase. Inside lay a thick blue medical file wrapped with an official hospital seal. Nadia frowned. What is that? The doctor gently pushed the file toward her. It's yours. My medical file? Yes, she looked confused, but I've never had any serious illness. Dr. Samuel folded his hands. Nadia, do you remember the interior design project you worked on 6 years ago? She nodded immediately. It was my first major commercial project. The exhibition center? Yes. You also remember there was an accident involving the ventilation system? I do. The entire finishing team had to evacuate. The doctor nodded. You were one of them. Nadia searched her memory. I remember coughing for several days afterward. The hospital told me it was only mild irritation. Dr. Samuel looked directly into her eyes. That was not the complete diagnosis. The room became completely silent. Nadia stared at him. What do you mean? The doctor carefully opened the file. Inside were examination reports, x-rays, laboratory results, and specialist notes. He turned several pages before speaking. You inhaled a concentrated mixture of industrial chemicals during that accident. The exposure caused temporary damage to your lungs. Nadia's eyes widened. I never knew that. The injury was treatable. But during your recovery, your respiratory system became unusually sensitive. He paused briefly. Extended exposure to cooking smoke and certain heated food preservatives could have significantly increased the risk of triggering another inflammatory episode. Claudine frowned. So that's why. Doctor nodded. At that time, yes. For most people, cooking would have been perfectly safe, but Nadia's situation was different. The risk wasn't immediate. It was cumulative. The more often she stood over high heat, the greater the concern. Nadia slowly looked toward Eric. So, you knew? Eric nodded without lifting his eyes. Yes, for 6 years. Yes, her voice shook. Why didn't you tell me? Eric remained silent. Dr. Samuel answered instead. Because he asked us not to. Nadia looked stunned. You agreed? I didn't agree immediately. I argued with him. I told him the truth belonged to you. So why? The doctor sighed. Because your husband sat exactly where you are sitting now. And begged me. Eric finally spoke. I wasn't thinking like a businessman. I wasn't thinking logically. I was thinking like a man who had already buried someone he loved. P. Everyone turned toward him. He slowly stood. My mother worked in industrial kitchens for years. She ignored the warning signs. She kept saying she was fine. P. By the time we discovered how serious her condition had become, his voice cracked. It was too late. He swallowed hard. When Dr. P. Samuel explained your condition, I stopped hearing everything else. The only thing I heard was, she could get worse if she's exposed repeatedly. P. I couldn't risk it. Nadia whispered, so you decided for me. Eric closed his eyes. Yes, you never thought I deserved to know. I thought. P. He struggled to continue. I thought if you knew, you would blame yourself. You would give up your career. P. You would think you were broken. I couldn't bear watching that happen. Tears gathered in Nadia's eyes, but instead, P. You let me spend 6 years believing you didn't want my cooking. Eric looked at her. Pain filled his face. I know. I thought it was a small price. P. A smaller price than losing you. Claudine quietly wiped a tear from her own eye. She had been angry with Eric only hours earlier. Now she saw a different man. P. Not a controlling husband, a frightened one. Dr. Samuel closed the medical file. I have spent decades treating patients, and I have learned something important. Illness is difficult. P. But silence often creates wounds that medicine cannot heal. He looked at both of them. Eric acted out of love. There is no doubt about that. P. But love without honesty can still cause pain. Nadia slowly opened the medical file again. Every annual examination, every specialist consultation, every follow-up appointment, each one carried Eric's signature. P. 6 years. Without missing a single appointment, she suddenly remembered every routine health check. Eric had insisted they attend together. She had always believed he was simply being thoughtful. Now she understood. P. He had been protecting her every single year. Yet one question still remained. She looked at him. Eric. He raised his eyes. Did you ever miss my cooking? P. For the first time that morning. Eric smiled through tears. I never stopped. Nadia frowned slightly. What do you mean? Eric hesitated. P. Then looked toward the hallway leading to his private study. There is something else. Something I've never shown anyone. Nadia followed his gaze. She had no idea. P. That inside that room waited one final secret. One that would completely change everything she believed about the past 6 years. At 4:27 p.m., the late afternoon sunlight filtered gently through the sheer white curtains of Eric Habinezer's private study. The room, which was usually locked, had been left open because Eric had gone with Dr. P. Samuel to the hospital to complete a follow-up consultation regarding Nadia's recovery plan. Only Nadia and Claudine remained at the house. Neither woman had spoken much since that morning. Not because they were angry, but because each of them was still trying to make sense of everything they had learned. Claudine wandered toward the bookshelf, dusting one of the framed family photographs. Nadia. How are you feeling? Nadia smiled faintly. I honestly don't know. Part of me wants to thank him. And another part, still hurts. Claudine nodded. I think both feelings can exist at the same time. Nadia quietly agreed. As she looked around the study, something caught her attention. An old smartphone rested on the corner of Eric's desk. It was different from the one he carried every day. She picked it up. I've never seen this phone before. Claudine glanced over. Maybe it's an old one. The screen lit up. There was no password. Nadia hesitated. I shouldn't look. Claudine smiled gently. You don't have to. Nadia was about to place it back on the desk when a photo synchronization notification appeared. One folder automatically opened. Its titles were simple. Home Without Thinking. She tapped it. The first photograph appeared. A slightly burned loaf of homemade bread. Nadia blinked. I remember this. She smiled through surprise. It was the first thing I ever baked for Eric. She swiped to the next picture. A bowl of pumpkin soup. Then grilled tilapia with lemon. Coconut rice, mandazi, beef stew, fresh vegetables, homemade pastries, photo after photo, hundreds of them. Each carefully taken, beautifully framed. Many captured her smiling in the kitchen years before they were married. She never knew Eric had taken them. Her hands began to tremble. Claudine! You need to see this. Claudine stepped closer. Oh my goodness. Nadia kept scrolling. 100 photographs, then 200, then over 300. Every meal she had ever prepared during their years of dating had been preserved. Not one was missing. Then she noticed something else. Each photograph contained a short note beneath it. The first meal she ever made for me. She stayed awake until midnight trying to perfect this recipe. She laughed because she accidentally added too much salt. This is still my favorite soup. She looked so proud today. Tears slowly filled Nadia's eyes. He remembered everything. Claudine whispered he never forgot. Nadia opened another folder. This one contained notes instead of photographs. The first entry read, "If Nadia is ever completely healthy again." Her heart skipped. She opened it. "The first thing I'll ask her to cook is her beef soup. I'll finish every spoonful. Then I'll finally tell her how much I've missed the smell of her cooking. I only hope she hasn't stopped loving me by then." A tear rolled down Nadia's cheek. She continued reading. Another note. "Today is our 3rd wedding anniversary. I asked Chantal to follow Nadia's old recipe. It still doesn't taste the same." Maybe because the recipe was never the secret. She was. Nadia covered her mouth. Another entry. She smiled when she looked at the kitchen today. "I know she misses cooking. I'm sorry, my love. As long as you're safe, I can live with you misunderstanding me." She could no longer stop crying. Claudine quietly stepped back, giving her friend the privacy she needed. As Nadia reached into the desk drawer, a small leather notebook slipped it onto the floor. She picked it up. Inside were receipts, air purification systems, high-performance ventilation units, indoor air quality monitors, advanced filtration equipment. Every upgrade installed in the kitchen over the past 6 years, every purchase had one purpose. Not luxury, not appearance, Nadia. Tucked into the final page was a folded handwritten letter. She immediately recognized Eric's handwriting. Her fingers trembled as she unfolded it. "If you're reading this, it probably means I finally ran out of excuses. I know you'll be angry. I know you'll feel hurt. But what frightened me wasn't your anger. It was the thought of standing beside another grave. The way my father once stood beside my mother's, I couldn't survive that. I love you more deeply than I know how to say, if I ever had to choose, between letting you misunderstand me or losing you forever. I would choose your misunderstanding. Every single time." Nadia pressed the letter against her chest. For years, she had believed she was the only one suffering. Now she realized Eric had been carrying his own silent pain every day. He had simply hidden it better. Just then, the front door opened downstairs. Eric had returned. He walked toward his study. As he reached the doorway, he stopped. Nadia stood there holding the old phone. The letter remained in her hand. Their eyes met. Neither spoke. The silence was no longer filled with distance. It was filled with understanding slowly. Nadia walked toward him. She held out the old phone. "You kept all of them?" Eric nodded quietly. "Every single one. You remembered every meal? I remembered every meal. Every smile. Every laugh. Every moment you stood in a kitchen." His voice trembled. "I never stopped missing it." Tears streamed down Nadia's face this time. She didn't step away. She stepped forward. Wrapping her arms around Eric, she held him tightly. For the first time in 6 years, neither of them had to carry the truth alone. And in that silent embrace, the burden that had lived between them for so long finally disappeared. Warm sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows of the Habineza residence, filling the kitchen with a brightness it had never seemed to possess before. The room that had once been surrounded by light silence, unanswered questions, and hidden fears now felt completely different. Technicians were putting the final touches on a newly installed high-capacity ventilation system recommended by Dr. Samuel. Advanced air purification units, smart air quality sensors, and upgraded exhaust equipment had transformed the kitchen into one of the safest spaces in the house. Eric Habaneza stood nearby, carefully listening as the lead engineer explained every feature. "You can rest easy now, Mr. Habaneza. This ventilation system exceeds the safety standards used in most commercial kitchens." Eric nodded politely. "Thank you." The technician smiled. "I don't think your wife has anything to worry about anymore." When the workers finally left, the house became quiet once again. Nadia slowly stepped into the kitchen. For a long moment, she simply stood there. The white marble counters reflected the morning light. The polished cabinets gleamed. Everything looked familiar. Yet everything felt completely new. Eric walked toward her. "This kitchen has been waiting for you." Nadia turned and smiled softly. Are you sure? He laughed gently. I've been waiting much longer than the kitchen. She looked at him with tears beginning to gather again. Without saying another word, Eric reached behind her and tied the strings of the green apron she had worn only once before. This time, there was no fear in his hands, only peace. When he finished, he stepped back and smiled. There, you finally look exactly the way I've imagined for 6 years. Nadia laughed through her tears. I've never seen you so emotional. I've spent 6 years pretending to be stronger than I really was. She reached for his hand. You don't have to pretend anymore. Together they opened the refrigerator. Fresh vegetables, beef, herbs, everything had already been prepared. Eric picked up the cutting board. What should I do? Nadia looked amused. You? Yes, I want to help. She laughed. I've never seen you volunteer in a kitchen. I've never been allowed to. They both laughed. It was the kind of laughter that only comes after surviving something painful together. As Nadia began chopping vegetables, Eric carefully washed them beside her. Every few moments their hands accidentally touched. Neither of them pulled away. There was no awkwardness, only gratitude. The kitchen slowly filled with familiar sounds. The gentle rhythm of a knife against the cutting board, water running softly from the sink. A pot beginning to simmer, and above everything else, conversation, real conversation, not silence, not secrets, just honesty. The front door suddenly opened. Claudine walked inside carrying a bouquet of fresh flowers. Behind her came Dr. Samuel. The doctor stopped at the kitchen entrance and smiled. This is exactly what I hoped I would see. Nadia greeted them warmly. You're just in time. Today you're both having lunch with us. Claudine looked around dramatically. So, no one is throwing Nadia out of the kitchen anymore? Eric laughed. If I tried now, I think she'd throw me out of the house. Everyone burst into laughter. Even Dr. Samuel smiled. It was the first genuine laughter that had filled the house in years. As lunch continued cooking, Dr. Samuel quietly walked over to Eric. You made one mistake. Eric nodded immediately. I know. I should have told her. Yes. But don't spend the rest of your life punishing yourself. Spend it earning back the trust you almost lost. Eric looked toward Nadia, who was happily seasoning the soup while talking with Claudine. I intend to. Later, while setting the table, Nadia noticed a small wooden box sitting inside one of the upper cabinets. She looked at Eric. What's this? He smiled nervously. Open it. She untied the ribbon. Inside was a beautifully bound leather notebook. Across the front page were handwritten words. Meals I want to cook with you. Nadia slowly opened it. Each page contained the name of a different meal. Pumpkin soup, beef stew, grilled tilapia, fresh bread, mandazi, pilau, vegetable curry, homemade desserts. Next to every recipe was a blank space for a date. Every page was empty. She looked up. When did you make this? The first year of our marriage. You've kept it all this time? Eric nodded. I wanted us to fill every page together. I just didn't know when. Nadia gently closed the notebook. I think today is the right day to begin. Eric smiled. I think so too. 1 year later. The Habineza home had become known throughout Kigali for something very different. Nadia and Eric established a community initiative that helped families create healthier kitchen environments for loved ones recovering from respiratory illnesses or workplace injuries. Nadia used her experience as an interior designer to develop safer home kitchens, while Eric partnered with local businesses to sponsor ventilation systems for families who could not afford them. On weekends, the couple hosted free cooking workshops for newly married couples. The classes were never just about recipes. They were about communication, trust, partnership. At every workshop, Nadia shared one lesson she had learned. A meal prepared with love is precious, but love becomes even more meaningful when it is shared with honesty. Eric always followed her with a quiet confession. If I could relive those 6 years, I would still protect my wife, but this time, I would protect her with the truth, not silence. Back at home, the kitchen was no longer a place of fear. It became the heart of their family. Some evenings, Eric chopped vegetables while Nadia stirred soup. Other evenings, they laughed over recipes that didn't turn out quite right. Sometimes they simply stood together in comfortable silence, grateful for ordinary moments they had once thought they might never have. Looking back, Nadia realized that the greatest misunderstanding in their marriage had never been about cooking. It had been about trust. Fear had convinced Eric that carrying every burden alone was an act of love. But healing taught them something much greater. Love does not grow stronger through silence. It grows stronger when two people choose to face the truth together. And every time the warm aroma of homemade soup filled their kitchen, it reminded them that the most beautiful home is not built with marble, glass, or expensive designs. It is built with honesty, with forgiveness, and with two hearts that finally learned they never had to carry life's burdens alone. 1 year later, the Habineza residence was no longer remembered as the house that once held painful secrets. Instead, it had become the starting point for countless stories of healing and hope. Nadia Uwimana and Eric Habineza established a small community foundation in Kigali dedicated to helping families create safer living environments for loved ones recovering from respiratory illnesses or warps-related injuries. Using her expertise as an interior designer, Nadia transformed ordinary kitchens into bright, modern, and healthier spaces, while Eric worked with local businesses to provide funding for ventilation systems and safety equipment. Every weekend, they hosted free cooking workshops for young married couples because Nadia believed that a shared meal nourishes not only the body, but also the relationship between two people. For the first time in 6 years, Eric sat at their dining table and peacefully enjoyed the beef soup Nadia had prepared with her own hands. He no longer glanced anxiously at the ventilation system or worried about hidden dangers. Instead, he simply smiled as Nadia asked softly, "Is it good?" Eric reached across the table, gently held her hand, and replied, "I've been waiting 6 years to taste this again." Laughter filled the kitchen, and the room that had once been defined by fear finally became the place where their happiest memories were made. The part of this story that stayed with me the most was not the secret Eric carried for 6 years, but how easily love can become silence when it is driven by fear. Many people believe that keeping painful truths hidden is the best way to protect those they love. Yet when honesty disappears, even the purest intentions can slowly create distance, misunderstanding, and loneliness. Real love is not about carrying every burden alone or making every decision for someone else. It is about trusting one another enough to face difficult truths together, even when those conversations are uncomfortable. This story also reminds us not to judge someone's actions too quickly. What appears to be coldness or control on the outside may sometimes hide deep fear, grief, or past trauma that no one else can see. At the same time, good intentions should never replace open communication. The strongest relationships are built on honesty, mutual respect, and the courage to walk through life's hardest moments side by side. Perhaps the greatest lesson of all is that protecting the people we love should never mean shutting them out of the truth. Sometimes the most powerful act of love is simply having the courage to say, "Let's face this together."